When we think of Canada, we think of ice hockey, poutine, and Justin Trudeau's devilish good looks. We also tend to think of Canada as the land of big government and too much regulation. But one Canadian province succeeded in reducing its regulatory burden. In fact, the story of how British Columbia massively shrank its regulatory burden and improved the lives of its citizens proves that cutting red tape can be more than just an election time slogan. But first things first, what exactly is red tape? Red tape is government regulation that goes beyond the minimum needed to achieve objectives like community safety, protection of property rights, and peaceful settlement of disputes. Everybody agrees that some regulation is necessary, but too often, unnecessary regulation is layered on top, going beyond this bare minimum. Over time, we're left with regulations which are outdated, pointless, and often downright crazy. This is what we refer to as red tape. By the end of the 1990s, red tape plagued almost every aspect of the British Columbian economy. For example, bridges had to be built with nails of a certain length, restaurants could only have TVs of a certain size, golf courses had to have a certain number of par 4 holes, and ski lodges had to decide their patron capacity based on the number of vertical feet it took to get to the top of the mountain. It drove people and businesses crazy and made it harder to employ people and cost the British Columbian economy billions. So what did the government do? First, it had to work out exactly how big the problem was. But unlike other red tape reduction programs, British Columbia did not measure red tape by the number of regulations or even by the number of pages. They counted the number of individual regulatory requirements, largely by looking for words like shall and must. This was a much more precise method of measurement, and the count showed that altogether there were 330,812 individual regulatory requirements on the books. Next, the government set out to reduce the total number of regulations by at least a third. They did this in a number of ways. One of these was a 1 in, 2 out rule, which meant that for every new regulatory requirement that a minister proposed to introduce, they had to eliminate 2. After a few years, to maintain its progress, the government kept a 1 in, 1 out rule in place. The result? Since 2001, British Columbia has reduced its red tape burden by 48%. That's over 160,000 individual regulatory requirements off the books. By slashing red tape, the government unleashed a massive wave of prosperity. It went from being one of Canada's worst performing economies to one of its best. Economic growth soared, thousands of new businesses were created, and personal incomes grew in real terms by almost 20%. What would happen if we followed the British Columbian example? Red tape cost the Australian economy $176 billion every year. Cutting it would make our lives easier, our businesses more successful, and our living standards greater. So to governments across Australia, we say, be more like British Columbia. It's time to get serious about cutting red tape and unleashing prosperity for every Australian.